Happy New Year and hello, everyone. My name is Jordana Thompson, and I'm the program coordinator for Junior Achievement of New Mexico. Thank you for attending our virtual career speaker series event. This program is open to JA students across New Mexico and highlights business professionals, entrepreneurs, and innovative thinkers from a variety of industries. Each featured speaker will share details about their education, job, and career journey. During the speaker's presentation, please make sure your mics are muted. And if you have questions, go ahead and write them down or put them in the chat box, and we will address those during the Q&A portion of the event. Today, I am super pumped to welcome Brandon Garrett, one of the co-founders of Electric Playhouse here in Albuquerque. Brandon, thank you so much for being here with us. I'll go ahead and share my screen, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to present to everybody today. And, as Jordana mentioned, I'm the co-founder and I'm the CEO of Electric Playhouse. And I'm just excited to share my journey. And so, just to get to know me a little bit, I'm a native New Mexican. I'm actually born in Albuquerque and kind of attended school throughout APS. And for those history teachers or students interested in New Mexico history, my great-grandfather is actually Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid fame. So it's kind of a fun connection I have to New Mexico. And so, during my education journey, I went through, Cleveland Middle School, eventually graduated high school at Del Norte High School. And one thing, that kind of stuck with me as I was growing up is that I was obsessed with Legos. And I would just spend hours using my imagination to kind of create all types of these crazy creations. And I think at that early age, just loving that is that I knew I wanted to become an architect. And so with that in mind, I kind of started to think about my journey and where I wanted to go in terms of education. And actually a funny story is the other day I was cleaning my mom's attic and I even found paperwork from when I was in kindergarten. And it listed me as an architect. So I kind of had this, destined, and that was my big goal. And so, while attending high school, I ended up, started working early, actually. I got a job at Target, when I was a junior in high school, knowing that I wanted to go pursue a degree in architecture at UNM. And so I was kind of working to get, the scholarships I could, and then also, have a job that can help kind of sustain me through my college education. And one thing I learned early on is that it's a process to become an architect. And, you have to get licensed and you have to obtain what's called a professional degree. And so each state varies, but in New Mexico, that requires you to get a master's degree. So before you can even, start that entire process, you have to do that. And so that process probably took me about 7 years. And so that's me kind of completing my undergraduate degree. One thing that's really important to becoming an architect is actually getting that real world experience and working in an architecture firm. And so after I kind of got my bachelor's degree, I ended up taking a year off and working just to kind of learn about the profession and really understand, is this really what I thought it would be? And, you kind of dabble in that. And so it was, of course. And then I kind of continued and pursued my master's degree from UNM. And so once you, you get your degree, it's a little bit of a path where you'll do essentially an internship. And so can take, a couple years to kind of go through that entire process. But that's where you're really learning about, the trade. And architecture is a profession that really relies on mentorship. And so I had a lot of great mentors and architects in the community that really guide you in terms of, how to interact with clients, how to actually build the buildings, and how you communicate those designs to contractors so that you can take that model or that paper drawing and actually turn it into something real. And so it requires just lots of experience there. And really, once you go through that process, then it's this whole examination. And so, I think it's now maybe a 6-part test, but each test is about 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours in length, and takes a little bit of time, but you're when you're becoming a professional, there's a lot of responsibility with that. Buildings can't be collapsing around us at all times. And so it's a very serious kind of profession. And so once you get through that process, then you actually become licensed. And so I became a licensed architect. And all in, I think that process probably took me about 11 years to get, my license and become an architect. And so prior to Electric Playhouse, I worked for an awesome architectural firm here in New Mexico, Decker Parrott Sabatini, and I did lots of work on kind of civic and commercial projects. So stuff you may recognize is like Albuquerque Uptown. I worked on that project a long time ago. I designed a couple fire stations in town and the convention center and dozens of other projects. The thing with architecture is it takes a real team to kind of pull these off. And so it's really fun to be part of, projects at different capacities. And so sometimes you're designing stuff, sometimes you're documenting, and sometimes you're kind of in that initial client relations and really kind of selling, the idea of what that building can be. And so I loved architecture. And like I said, I love playing with Legos. And the other thing I kind of loved is video games. And so I just loved kind of playing these games. And the one fun thing about those games at my time is that some of them would come with these like really fun little tool sets that allowed you to build your own games, essentially. For you, that's probably Minecraft now, right? Or anything else that's out there that lets you kind of create your own worlds. But to me, that idea of like this digital space where you could simulate lighting, shadows, materials, and then kind of your whole story through a level or an experience just fascinated me. And so I was able to actually kind of combine my passion for technology and architecture while at the architecture firm. And so by kind of taking that, I became, in a sense, kind of their like technology expert. And so you can progress to the next slide here. So I would be able to find like really cool tools and technologies that really helped us design and build better buildings, and then help those clients to visualize their project really early in the design phase. And so that included implementation of a lot of like 3D programs, like Revit, SketchUp. I would use game engines that build video games so that we can actually create, virtual reality simulations. And so we experimented with lots of really fun and interesting technology. In that photo, you can see actually several things: a VR headset, 3D printing. And so we would print physical models because that really gives you a good sense of scale. And so we'd explore those technologies, rendering that you see on the TV there, and projection mapping. And so it's a combination of all of that that really helps us tell the story. And that way, those clients really understood what they were getting. And it wasn't just looking at a paper set of drawings, which sometimes can be hard to really conceptualize and understand. So that's my profession, is actually an architect. And that was kind of my education kind of journey to that point. And so you may be wondering, how on earth does an architect then start an entertainment company? And so Electric Playhouse, in a sense, kind of combined those two passions of mine. It's the physical world, that architecture piece, and then that digital world of the video games. And so in a sense, we wanted to create the experience of stepping into like a video game or stepping into a movie and becoming immersed in these like giant video game worlds where the walls and floors can react to you. And as an architect, we kept having clients who would come to us with these big empty box stores. With Amazon and other stores, it was hard for others to compete. And so there's these big buildings that are sitting all around the country that are empty. And so we thought, why don't we just turn these physical spaces into giant digital spaces? And so there's big advantages to doing to that. And so we just see the building as the next big media platform. And so you have your phones that you're playing your games on, your video games. And now the idea that you can just step into a space and you don't have to wear any headset. We actually have sensors that track your motion, and then everything reacts to you. And so by being a digital space, we can actually change what we are with the click of a button. So we do much like a TV, you can change the channel and there's shows for kids. There's shows your parents watch, and there's probably boring shows your grandparents watch. And so our idea is that we can change content to really cater to all ages. And we offer things from games. We do coding camps. So we teach you how to code and build the games that are in our facility, field trips, immersive art shows, concerts. And we even apply that technology to our party rooms and other events. So Jordana, I've got a couple videos that will show you just a little bit about Electric Playhouse. It's hard to describe. So if you don't mind playing those. Awesome. You can stop on that one, Jordana. So that kind of gives you a good sense of some of the games and interactivity. And the great part, like I mentioned, is you're not wearing any headsets. So you just walk in and everything reacts. So it really does allow that. And to kind of create that, it really requires a team of a lot of talented and really passionate people. So we employ all kinds of different STEAM-related careers. So that's artists, computer scientists, developers. We have system engineers, IT specialists, fabrication. And then on our business side, we have accountants, human resources, and then a whole slew of different professions like lawyers, administrative professionals. So it does take a pretty big team to kind of pull that off. And as a CEO, my job is to really push that big idea and vision and really inspire that entire team to kind of collectively work together so we can achieve those big ideas and those goals. And so, here's on that screen is just an image of some of those content offerings. We keep changing that at all times, but even outside of Electric Playhouse, we've done stuff for museums. We'll build exhibits utilizing that technology. And we have a traveling pop-up version that tours around the country right now. And so people can kind of get a little sense of that. And so I'll kind of leave you with some quotes or just something that had always inspired me is that this quote from Mark Twain has stuck with me my whole life. And that's just really the idea of finding a job that you enjoy doing, and then you never work a day in your life. And as you can imagine, I don't really feel I at work that often. We're building games, we're having a lot of fun. And I see a lot of kids or high schoolers who are, maybe not sure, and they're just kind of researching. And I think the worst thing you can do is just search for those jobs that just pay the most money, because in what you do in life, you really need to be passionate about it and you just want to be motivated. And those who find those professions that they love, they just naturally kind of, you just love it, you live it, and you're just naturally going to progress and never lose motivation in trying to achieve your goals. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. Students, it is now time for us to go into our Q&A portion of the event. I'll start us off with a question just to get everybody's gears turning. Please feel free to throw your questions in the chat box or write them down, and we'll give you a chance to unmute and ask Brandon your question as well. But to start us off, who would you say was your biggest influence?
Oh, my biggest influence was actually Walt Disney, and not in the sense of just the movies and that, but he's always was finding really fun and fascinating ways to leverage technology to just create really magical experiences. In a sense, as adults and those, who kind of understand the technology kind of know what's happening, but it is really powerful to kind of create that sense of magic for those guests who don't know how the space is working. And to me, that's just something that has always driven us and driven where we want to be, is that passion to just create magic, these digital wonderlands, and really inspire the future kind of professionals and really encourage kind of education on STEAM related fields.
Do you give discounts for like field trips or like kids from schools?
Yes, we do. We love to host schools and field trips. We kind of educate on STEAM and how the building is built. And so we have a whole events team and people that will definitely help coordinate that at any time. You can visit our website and we have some information on contacting us, or there's a simple email, abq@electricplayhouse.com. And so email's the best way because there's lots of people, and so we can direct those questions to the right party.
Smell a field trip of Bruin. That sounds like a fun one to go to. Go ahead. Looks like there's another question in Ms. Townsend's bag.
I was wondering what your favorite building you designed was.
I liked designing the fire stations. I think it was really fun to do that because firefighters kind of live an interesting life where they're on call all the time. And so you're kind of building a house for them, and they have multiple crews. And so you end up designing like funny things like kitchens with 3 refrigerators, because each crew has their own fridge. They kind of have their own little thing that goes on. And you're also dealing with, fire trucks and just lots of different kind of complexity to that. And so you can do a lot in this little tiny footprint and really build these great, facilities that are kind of open to the public. We think, at least in our design and the design on that one, is they should be fun and have their own little character to it. And so I think that was probably my favorite.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, did you make any specific games for the buildings, or did you make up your own?
So we've made all the games. And so we have a team that kind of tries to brainstorm, how do you build a game that doesn't have a controller, where your body is actually the controller in that. And so everything that you've seen there, we've kind of built in-house, and we're continuing to kind of grow and expand on that team. And so, our big goal is that we're constantly adding new games to the library and the experience, so that if you went, 1 month, the next time you came back, you'll see all new games and experiences. So we want every visit to Electric Playhouse to be really unique.
How many different attractions do you have at the Electric Playhouse?
So we have about 16 different interactive spaces, and they range in size. So we have areas that are like 1-player to 3-player games. Our biggest area can have about 48 people playing a game at one time. And then we've got special spaces. We have like a room where you can throw balls at the wall. And so we have a really popular game where aliens are on the wall and you got to throw the ball to squish them in time before they destroy you. And then, outside of like the game areas, we do lots of really cool birthday parties. And so the table's interactive. People can eat and play with the table. So it's a lot of physical spaces, but then in each one of those 16 spaces, there could be 5 to 10 different games in there. And so it's constantly changing and evolving.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you had a scenario where you mess up on a code.
Oh, I mess up all the time. I mean, really, to be honest, especially when you're starting a new business, and when you're building new game, when you're doing anything new, you're going to mess up. And that's probably the most important thing that you have to understand, is that that's not a bad thing. And that the best way that we've improved anything is to learn through those kind of failures. And so a good example is that, we'll build a game and we all think it's so awesome and cool. And then we release it to the public. And then we watch the public and how they interact with it. And then they just completely don't get it and they don't understand it. And so that tells us a lot of stuff about, changes we need to make to that, so it's more intuitive and then really improve the product. And so, that's just part of any design process when you're doing new stuff.
Thank you. Would you ever want a student advisory council?
Oh, we would love that. I mean, you're kind of our audience, and it's better to like have a group of guinea pigs that could come in and test it out and play it before things go live. And so that's a great idea. And I think we'll need to figure out how to kind of facilitate that on our end. But I think that would be really cool. I've got 3 kids. My oldest is 12. I've got a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old. So they kind of get to do that, but surprisingly, they get bored of Electric Playhouse because that's all I talk about, and that's where they're at all day long. So I need a real group of like fun kids that really want to play games.
I was wondering how much it costs to go to the Electric Playhouse.
So like if you're just there on a weekend, it's 15 for kids, 18 for adults. But if it's a field trip, we have really good rates. And we do just a number of different functions for schools. And so depending on where you come, we try and keep it really affordable. So we really want you there multiple times throughout the year.
Thanks. So for the Electric Playhouse, do you guys use like projectors?
We use a combination of projectors, and then we have, so that's what gets the image on the walls and floors at that size. You know, some of the walls are like 16 to 20 feet in height. So it's like a movie theater screen size. And then we combine that with the whole network of sensors. Actually, some of the sensors you may even have at your house if you owned an Xbox. We had Microsoft Kinects. And so some of the rooms are actually using Kinects as the sensor data. And then others are using more sophisticated LiDAR. But essentially, that's how we track you in the space. And so it's the combination of those two things that makes you feel like you're in a giant video game.
Thank you.
I was wondering, do you guys like have any VR or anything there, or is it just like touch?
So right now, we don't do any virtual reality. You know, you're kind of, the entire experience is essentially like a giant virtual reality experience, except you're actually with other people. And that was always our challenge with VR, is that it's like a very singular experience. You know, once you're in a headset, like you don't see anybody around you. But the one thing that we are exploring is not virtual reality, but augmented reality. So that's a little bit of a different technology, but it's, in a sense, you're wearing a headset, but you can actually see the world around you. But then we can add a bunch of digital things into that world. And so we're looking at using augmented reality to basically pull that stuff you see on the walls into the space in front of you. And so you can actually interact with like a digital game world that surrounds you while being immersed in that projected environment.
Okay, thank you.
Last call for questions from anyone on the call. You can throw them in the chat if you don't want to unmute and ask your question. Oh, Aaron's got a question. Go for it, Aaron.
Thank you. Mr. Garrett, can you talk a little bit about the transition from a full-time job with a steady paycheck and a well-known company in town to an entrepreneurial endeavor, and sort of maybe how that transition took place for you, and even some of the psychological and emotional aspects of making that transition?
Yeah, that can be really tough. You know, I'd actually been with that firm for probably about 15 years. And so I'd advanced, and, you know, I love my job there. That was just a fantastic company and a great place. And sometimes in those roles, you know, and kind of in my role at the firm, I would kind of define it as like an intrapreneur, not an entrepreneur, but rather I was constantly pitching like, hey, we should do this or we should do that. And with those ideas, you kind of have to build like a little business model and a case for a company to kind of invest in certain technologies and do that. And so, you know, I had experience kind of exploring ideas that way within the comfort of the office. And, you know, they probably got tired of me asking for stuff all the time and, you know, pitching them, but it actually ended up being great practice for what would eventually become me pitching to investors, because essentially, you know, to create something from scratch, it requires money, and you need to kind of sell other people on that vision, and you want them to believe in you in order to kind of make that possible. And so I was really fortunate in that the firm, you know, had an interest in what I was doing, and they supported me in that too. And so they kind of helped me with that transition. And, me and the other co-founders, we really just felt passionate about this idea and this opportunity because nothing like this existed on the market. We saw a big opportunity where landlords and mall owners would want, entertainment in their facilities. And that, when you're obsessed with something and that's all you think about all day and you think it's really good, I think that was my mental preparedness. Like, hey, what we're doing is actually interesting. I think we have a real chance here. And I think when we sold the idea and got enough investment where we knew we had, at least several months to really make that shift over. And that's where we kind of had that security, like, hey, others actually believe in this thing. And if they believe in it, I bet you others do as well. And so that was my motivation and our kind of motivation to move forward. Good question.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Brandon. That was fantastic. All righty. Well, I believe that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you, everyone who joined us on the call for our event. Students, I hope you enjoyed today's program. Before we log off, just a couple of announcements. Following this presentation, you will be asked to complete a post-program mindset survey, and we would really appreciate your participation in evaluating our program. So teachers, please make sure you share the link to the survey with your students. And lastly, please make a note that these events will be happening monthly and will be hosted on the second Wednesday of every month. Next month, on February 8th, we will welcome Angela Brunke, the Division President of RS21 Health Lab. So keep an eye out for those registration links in your email. Thank you again so much, Brandon, and to everyone on the call. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye, everybody.